It's another beautiful day emerging as the sun rises in the east and as turmoil continues in the west. We welcome you to this edition of Carpod Church. Now, some of you have been awake all night, wondering what's going on across the pond, and others of you are just waking up and checking your news feeds and seeing what's been happening. I want to invite you to take a few minutes out of the busyness of this day and to just reflect with me for a little while what it means to be church in a world that is difficult and challenging. You can see I'm having my breakfast in the car this morning. I woke up feeling particularly hungry, and I have my porridge and I have my fruit with me, and I'm really looking forward to eating that when I finish talking to you. So I'm going to keep this short and simple this morning. In fact, thinking about these things and about food reminds me of a short little verse in Acts 2, which says that the new believers shared their food with great joy and generosity. Now, that's a very important statement. They shared what they had with others with great joy and with generosity. And there's something in that for us, but of course, it wasn't always like that. The excitement and the enthusiasm of the new believers joining and hearing the story of Jesus and understanding what it meant to have God living with us and sharing with us and being part of our lives really drove people to do extraordinary things. Some people sold what they had and shared the money that they raised with everybody else. They used the money to support those who were hungry. They used the money to support those who were widows or had no father or mother or whatever, and they really reached out and supported one another. Sadly, that did not continue. St. Paul had to write to the Corinthians, and he had to give out to them basically and say, what is going on over there? What are you up to? I hear stories that when you have the Lord's Supper, that you actually have little feasts, and some people have loads of food and some people have very little. This isn't what the Lord's meal is about. Now, what happened is we have communion and we get a small piece of bread and a little sip of wine, and it's something we're quite familiar with. But back in the day, it was actually a meal. It was actually a time of gathering and fellowship. But of course, of the new believers, some were very poor and some were very hungry. So St. Paul had realized that what was happening was those who were wealthy were sitting with their friends, having these lavish meals, and others sitting only a few feet away from them, eating just little bits of bread and drinking some water. And St. Paul rightly challenged the early church and said, this is wrong. I think we have to think very carefully today. We're worried about a lot of things. We're worried about viruses. We're worried about elections. We're worried about all sorts of things that are actually out of our control. But what are the things that we can control? We can control what we do with what we have. We can keep it to ourselves. We can hide it away. We can make sure that we have enough for the rainy day or whatever. Or we can actually begin to think really seriously about sharing what we have with others. It's a big challenge. But we know that even here in Bray, there are people who are starving. There are people getting out of their bed right now, even children going to school, who don't have enough food to eat, who don't have enough money to get through this week. And we as Christians are being called to be sacrificial servants, people who will surrender what we have and share it with one another. This is a challenge to me, by the way. It's a challenge to all of us. It's not easy. We can be so caught up in fear and uncertainty and doubt about everything that's going on that the first thing we do is we gather everything together. We make sure that we have enough, that our family are safe, that there's enough food on the table. But actually we need to think beyond that. We need to find ways of coming alongside those who need support, because one day we'll need that support ourselves too. And we too will need the help of others. So this morning's message is very clear. Being church requires sacrificial sharing, but do it with joy and do it with generosity. Thank you.